the Latina Leadership Podcast, the podcast made for Latinas by Latinas, with Angelica Cázares, Carolina Arenas, Diana Ruby, Jacqueline Villagomez, and Sonia Ramirez. Get comfortable, amiga, and enjoy the conversations. Welcome to the Latina Leadership Podcast. On today's episode, we have the amazing Anna Hageage. Anna works for the U.S. Department of Labor under the Biden administration, and we are really excited to have you on. I'm going to go ahead and just let you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and then we're just going to dive in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. As you said, my name is Anna Hageage. I currently work for the U.S. Department of Labor as the Chief of Staff for the Employment and Training Administration. And so this is a position in the Biden administration, and ETA for short oversees a huge chunk of the American workforce. We serve about 20 million U.S. workers every year. And so the role I occupy helps to support and oversee some of the programs, or frankly, all of the programs and all of the staff within ETA. So we're an $11 billion agency with over 1,100 staff across the country. But again, I'm excited to be here and to talk with you a little bit about this work and about, how I've gotten here.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. We're all really excited that you agreed to be a guest on the show. Let's start from the beginning. How would you describe your upbringing, your childhood?
Sure. Well, I am a proud Mexican immigrant. I was born in Cuernavaca, Morelos, and then I came to the U.S. with my mom and dad, probably around between 6 and 8 years old. And I, came to the U.S. I started school not knowing any English. And just sort of out of sheer necessity, within 6 months, I learned how to speak English.
Wow, that's amazing.
I've been in DC now for close to 20 years since graduating college. But really, everything that I've done, I feel like my entire life is colored by that background and by, having been born in Mexico and having family in Mexico and just having that as my roots. I still have family in Mexico, so I go back once or twice a year. Cool. My dad and my mom both live on the Baja Peninsula. My mom in Ensenada, my dad in Dallas. So it's always an interesting feeling, right? It's that sort of ni de aquí ni de allá.
Definitely.
When you're in Mexico, you're like, okay, well, I need to go back to the U.S. When you're in the U.S., you're like, I can't wait to go back to Mexico.
They're two different worlds, right?
Exactly. And then in some rooms, you're really Mexican, and in some rooms you're not Mexican enough. So you're in the middle.
Yeah, as a third gen Mexican American, I understand that as well. I didn't grow up with as much culture as I would have liked to, but now that my husband's first gen, and so I definitely understand. Wherever you go, it can be a little bit different depending on who you're with. Yeah. Were you I guess growing up, were you always drawn to advocacy? I noticed that you've done a lot of advocacy in underserved populations. Were you always drawn to that kind of work?
It's interesting. When I was little, I would have told you that what I wanted to do was work for National Geographic and travel all over the world. And so I started off, I always wanted a degree in cultural anthropology. And then when I got to college, I decided I wanted to do archaeology. So actually, I graduated with a degree in anthropology. I went to Belize, and I did field school working on Maya monumental architecture. I realized that that's just a very difficult job, and it's a very remote and lonely job. And so I came back from field school, and everybody should have that opportunity, of course, to figure out whether or not this is truly what you want to do or something you don't.
Right.
And so I realized that even though this was my passion, that I really, really loved anthropology, really loved archaeology, really loved learning about Mesoamerican cultures and really just any ancient culture, that it wasn't something that I would necessarily want to make a living out of. Okay. And so, it's funny, there's an organization called the Latin American Youth Center, that
Mhm.
my father, when we first moved to the US, worked for. He was one of the first people that was hired by this agency or
Ah,
community-based organization. Um,
okay.
and so I've had like a 25-year, 30-year history with them. And come to
Wow.
first year out of college, I ended up working for them after I came back
Nice.
from field school, and I now sit on the board. And this was an
That's
organization.
right. I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an organization that, is rooted in the community. It's rooted in advocacy. It's rooted in, at the time, it was supporting, I think, immigrants coming to the U.S. from El Salvador from the Civil
Oh,
War there.
wow.
And so my dad taught English and GED. My mom, when she first came to this country, learned how to speak English, took typing lessons there. I remember running up and down the
Wow.
halls when I was little. And
Oh,
yeah, they were my first job out of college. And that's really how I started with this passion for advocacy, was through that organization.
wow. So they were a big part of your upbringing and your past and your future, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I sit on their board now. They're a
Wow.
fairly large organization. They have multiple charter schools. So I'm on the board
Mhm.
of the Career Academy, which is one of their charter schools.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love that. I guess growing up, you had, this. I guess you have this passion for advocacy. What would you say, if you can think about like who or what kind of helped you get to where you are today? I guess just advancing in your career. Like, can you think of, I guess, either people in your life or like, certain. It could even be this, is it a nonprofit
It
or
is a
just,
nonprofit. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
community-based organization. Yeah. I mean, nobody ever does anything alone, right? Everybody
yeah,
is always supported and guided
sure.
by sponsors or mentors or folks that just kind of help you along. And so that, I'm no different in that instance. I think that's certainly the case. I've had some
Mm,
really amazing mentors, both from LAYC and even beyond, right? So the founder of LAYC, Lori Kaplan, I knew her when I was little. I still know her now. She's recommended me for um, many spots, including being a board member. She's always been a wonderful advocate and a wonderful example.
mhm,
My boss when I was working at LAYC, her name was Lupi Quinteros Grady, and she's also
yeah,
an amazing, amazing community advocate. And her and
mm,
I have known each other for many years. And I remember I was working at the youth center, and my question to her was like,
mm,
"Do you really think I should stay in this field? Like, where do you think my strengths are?" And she really said, "This is definitely your field, right? This is something
yeah,
that you're really good at. This is something that I see you doing for a really long time." And so it was that sort of steer that helped keep me in the field of workforce development, because very few
I love
people
it.
actually like grow up thinking that's what they want to do.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
sort of finds you. Um,
that's amazing.
yeah, and then I've had, at the Department of Labor, I was here under the Obama administration as well, also an ETA
Mhm,
working as an advisor. I've had mentors and leaders from, Portia Wu to my former boss, Susie Levine, who was the former ambassador to Switzerland. Like, I've just had these amazing role models that
that's
pave the way and that really like want to make you the best version of yourself. Um,
right.
and so it's been just an amazing opportunity to absorb that and watch them in action.
That's amazing. I love that. What are your, I guess, what are your goals in your current position as your chief of staff of employment and training in the U.S. Department of Labor? What are some goals that you have right now in your position? And
Yeah.
I guess to caveat, what would you do? What would you do differently? Also, I guess from your predecessors.
Well, there's a certain amount I can say right now.
Yes,
There's a,
yes.
I will,
Only say what you can say, but word it however you feel comfortable.
so, I mean, I think I the one thing that really is conveyed about these kinds of jobs is that you come in knowing that this is going to be able to provide a huge amount of impact for the American people and for underserved
Mhm.
communities, right? And so you come in with that lens, knowing that this is such an awesome opportunity. And so the weight of any decision, frankly, that you make just weighs really heavily on you, because you know that it's such an awesome opportunity and that there's just
Right.
a lot riding on sort of what your efforts are.
Mhm.
I would say that, throughout my career, I've focused on supporting underserved communities, whether that's Latino communities, whether it's youth, whether it's low income or folks that, need support on the path to economic stability and mobility. That's always been sort of the passion that's undergirding what I do. And so when I came to DOL and ETA specifically, my goals were really to focus on that, right? To focus on equity and to focus on youth. And
Okay.
so, obviously, equity has become a huge buzzword, and it's become a huge initiative of a lot of different organizations. And so, I think for me, that meant both the hearts and minds of the staff that I know, the career staff that have been working here and doing yeoman's work year after year, and everything that they
Mhm.
do, and making sure that that we model the workplace that we are saying we want to see
Right.
in the American workforce. And so, if we change that, if we support those individuals, then we're also going to be impacting the public workforce system. And so for
Right.
me, that means, supporting, job quality, supporting how people are promoted or advanced or developed. In addition to looking at the various grants, I think right now ETA puts out about $4 billion in grants every year.
Wow.
And so looking at how those grants can really serve the communities that need them most and how they can get to
Mhm.
those communities. And I'm not alone in this effort, right? Everybody I think in the
Right.
department has this goal and this um, sort of mission, I feel like, ahead of them.
Mm.
Um, and the other piece too that you see from my background is a heavy focus on youth and young people. Um,
Yes. Yes.
and so that was one of the other things that I came in wanting to focus on. And
Okay.
so early on, we, really put you at the center of what we did. Um,
Mhm.
and I think my efforts have resulted in a couple of things. They've resulted in the first
Okay.
cohesive youth strategy in the department in about 18 years, and the first ever
Wow.
DEI officer, which there are, I think, now between 4 and 5 in the department.
Wow.
And so somebody that's really dedicated to this work, who's, always thinking day in, day out of how we can embed equity both in our internal practices and then in the
Mhm.
work that we do externally and how we can sort of bridge those two.
Mm.
So I think from day one, those have been sort of my primary areas or levers that I want
Yeah.
to pull.
That's wonderful. And when you talk about youth, like youth policy,
Mhm.
um, are you talking about like high schools, across the nation?
Yeah, I think we're looking at both. My history with youth and young people has primarily been with young people that are outside of the high school system. So I
Okay.
started off working in Maryland after I finished college, working with students that were gang involved, right? Immigrants to
Mm.
this country, young people that maybe didn't complete their high school education for whatever reason and
Okay.
needed support via first job or getting their GED. Um,
Right.
and quickly, realize that if I wanted to, you know, I if I wanted to make an impact beyond these just individuals I was working with one on one, there were some structural things that needed to change. And so
Mhm.
I went from sort of the local to the national and then back to the local again. I sort of toggled back and forth, trying
Uh-huh.
to apply some of the best practices that I've seen for, to maximize the impact. But, these are some of the most talented individuals I've ever met, these young people. They have passion, they have humility, they have authenticity and persistence. And it's just amazing to me the kinds of things that they can achieve if we're just given an opportunity.
Right. Right. If someone just takes a chance on them, gives them a shot, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's wonderful. I love that. I consider myself a child advocate as well, and I feel like I'm always inspired by people like and people like Mr. Rogers or even
Yeah.
Miss Rachel. I mean people that really or Raffi, the singer Raffi. People that really put take I guess they don't forget about the children. They see the importance, they see the value in youth, um, and that there's that's where our future is, right? you
Hmm.
know um, and I think it's great because it also like it ends you're ending cycles there, right? You
Yes,
have these cycles
absolutely.
of like poverty or lack of education or whatnot, and by doing this, by investing in youth, like you're putting an end to all that. You're starting a brand new chapter in these young people's lives, and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and my mom didn't have a high school education. My grandmother didn't. She was a single mother of 11 children, right? My
Wow.
mom came to the US not having any English, and she started from scratch. She got her GED. She went to community college. And so I think it's important to show with these young people that you don't have to have sort of an Ivy League pedigree. You don't have to have all of these
Right.
things sort of in place in order to be successful. And you see people that look like you and that talk like you and come from backgrounds like you in these places, and it's necessary, right? That's
Right.
the heart of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and
Mhm.
accessibility, that folks are different from you and they're bringing
Mhm.
a lot to the table to better serve, others in this system.
That's great. That's great. Um, what I guess what piece of advice would you give, like, to young females or Latinos out there that maybe are just starting out, and maybe they don't know where to start, or they're kind of like, hey, I'm not qualified, who's
Yeah.
gonna, like, who's gonna yeah, who's gonna listen to me, I
Yeah.
don't know, what would you say to, young females out there or Latinas out there that are, like, looking for, the next step? Like, how do I do
Yeah.
this,
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I remember reading somewhere a statistic that said that 80% of men will apply for a job if they know only 25% of the
Yes, I
duties,
saw
and
that.
that's not the case for women. I think it's something like 25% of women will do that. And then
Yes, like, we second guess ourselves more, right?
yes, exactly. Like you want to feel like you're going in there being successful. I will say, I guess two things. One, don't be afraid of failure. I have failed many times. And I've definitely had some painful ones.
Oh,
You learn from that, right? That's how
yeah.
you learn the most. And I think we need to normalize failing and learning, right? Like it's not a bad thing. It shouldn't be stigmatized. It's how we all learn and it's how we all grow.
I agree.
So if that's a fear, then take it off the table. Know it's going to happen, but know that you're resilient. You're going to pick yourself back up and keep on going, right? That's um, thing one about Latina women is I know that's just central. That's our core. Um,
Yes.
I would say the
Yeah.
second thing, the second thing, that I've definitely noticed it apart from that resiliency, um, is the fact that we really need to stretch ourselves. Like every job that I've gone after, or every activity, or every experience, has
Mhm.
always scared me a little bit or made me a little nervous. It's always out of my comfort zone a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so if you continue to like stretch yourself, then you're doing the right thing, right? So you go for that job, even if you're feeling like you're punching, above your weight. You
Yeah.
likely not. You're definitely not, right? Others are considering you for this. It's not just stroke of luck. It's because you're valued, you are worth it, and you really need to know that value, and you need to always stretch for something that's a little bit outside of your comfort level. That's another part of how we grow.
That's
So
I
yeah.
yeah, I agree with that 100%. That's great advice. Yeah, because I think also you forget that sometimes, when you're going along in the process, it's like you kind of have to be reminded of that.
Yeah.
Um, because especially when you go through obstacles, you can get discouraged and then just completely, like, forget that that you're capable, that we are capable of, like, so much more,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
definitely.
Um,
Absolutely.
what and I guess, that part of that is, you know um in your experience, and just, your wisdom, all the, even obstacles that you've had. Do you consider yourself, a Latina leader? Because, we're called the Latina Leadership Podcast, and so, yeah, we like to ask, like, do you consider yourself a Latina leader, and why?
I would like to think so. I feel like I don't necessarily think about that. Somebody asked me if I consider myself successful and like how I measure success.
Mm,
And I'm always kind of caught off guard because you're just sort of doing your thing day in and day out.
yeah.
And not necessarily always realizing that you're a leader or that you are in fact successful. So it's not often that you sort of take a pause and do that sort of retrospective, right? But
Yeah.
I think, a couple things about leadership that I try to embody. One,
Mhm.
you always, always, always have to treat people with respect and with dignity, right? So no matter what role you're in, you always want to treat others how you would want to be treated, right? And you always want to respect them.
Absolutely.
And if you have hiccups, right? Because there's sometimes when there's conflict, there's times when it's, you might make a mistake, and that's fine. Just own up to it. That is, in my mind, the true embodiment of a leader, knowing sort of and being able to acknowledge when you've made a mistake, but also
Mm.
always having in the front of your mind that you want to treat people well and that you want to be able to support individuals no matter what level they're in. So I'm
Mm.
always pretty generous with my time. I notice some folks tend to be a little bit like the higher up they go, they tend to be a little bit more restricted with their time because they
Yeah.
have less of it, obviously, and it makes sense. But I
Right.
think I always try to sort of carve out like 30% of my time needs to be available for folks that want to have one-on-ones or that want to, just pick things through, or whether it's interns or whether it's, fellows that are coming on board. You always want to spend some time with them to make sure that they're doing well and that you're answering any questions or you're helping to guide them in any way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean that we as Latinas, once we get to a certain point, we don't also need that, right? So
Right. That's
there's
true.
tiers.
Yeah. That's great. Would you say that like mentorship is like important to you?
It is. Um, I don't know that I've ever like officially had a mentor, you know what I mean? Like not an official mentor
Yeah.
um, relationship, but I've had women that I always call on that have been mentors to me. Um, And then also just kind of your network of women. I've always had
Right.
those women that, we just talk about like, can you believe this happened? Oh, that happened. And then like just hearing that other people have gone through it too,
Yeah.
is helpful. So you kind of don't feel so alone and in your head sometimes like, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that always
that's what
helps.
that is. That was a
Yeah.
microaggressor. That was this.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely a pattern for women. We definitely get in our heads a lot. And we often, need, that one person, we need to have like your designated people that you call upon when you need like a reminder, when you need someone to be like,
Yes,
"Hey, you can do this," or
absolutely.
yeah. Or, "Hey,
Absolutely.
no, you're not crazy." Um, what I guess in your position, you're what kind of I guess what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind? And this goes hand in hand with with like what the future holds for you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like immediate. It can be like long term. It can be short term. Just yeah. What do you have in mind for the future, and what are you thinking about in regards to like legacy?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, part of me just kind of wants to do the work. And as long as I do the work and I get things done that I know I want to accomplish and will make a positive impact, the legacy will follow, right? Like that's definitely not, I think, my focus when I came in. That's not something I wanted. I don't want to be like the front person that's always sort of being uh recognized. And so that's also a little bit of a female trait. I think you sort of lead from behind.
Right.
It's something that definitely to watch because making sure that you're getting, your your value is being recognized in a number of different ways. But
Mhm.
I think the two big things that I mentioned, youth and equity, are the ones that I really want to come away from these, at least this first term, knowing that I've made an impact on that. And I think I
Mhm.
have. One of my wonderful colleagues mentioned to me that the people that are the most successful in these kinds of situations are the ones that run around and pull as many levers as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And so when we look at youth and equity, I'm looking at like what are the levers we can pull, across where we are right now to make an impact down the line. And how
Okay.
is some of this embedded and how is some of this sustained and institutionalized for the long term?
Mhm.
Um, so I think in my mind, that's the legacy that I would want to leave, and the sort of get stuff done is always the mantra that
Yeah,
I come in with, and I go into any job with.
that's great. Um, we were talking about equity and talking about coming from an underserved population. You know, what are your thoughts on like, so we have Latina Equal Pay coming up in October.
Yes,
And
yes.
so actually, our founder Angelica Cáceres, she's actually she's putting on like a brunch. She likes to recognize it, and it's called, Latina Equal Pay Day. And so and it goes hand in hand, with like just equal pay for women, right, in the
Mhm.
workforce. Um, what are your thoughts on that? I guess being in the Department of Labor,
Yeah, I mean, of course, gender pay equity is a huge, huge issue. I think there's a lot that goes into just equal pay overall.
Mhm.
There's a lot that I think we need to focus on. There's the recognition of value, and there's also a recognition of the type of work that we do. Um,
Mhm.
and so we're consistently, and I'm sorry, my 5-year-old just came down. So if you see him in
Oh,
the
it's okay. And is it a boy or girl?
he's a boy.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say if he pops in, that's totally fine too. Like,
Thank you. I mean, I think,
my 3-year-old does that sometimes.
yeah,
So
yeah, it's sort of unavoidable, I think, since the beginning of
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Uh,
definitely, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that there's, when we focus on equity at the Department of Labor, we also focus on job quality, right? And so when
Mm,
we look at job quality, we're looking at parity in pay, in addition to working conditions, in addition to, opportunities for advancement, and of course, being treated well. And so there's a lot of, I think, on our end, what we see as occupational segregation from
mm,
Latinas in specific fields. And that's something that we definitely want to address and that we're working to address.
mm,
And there's sort of tools in our toolbox to be able to do that. And so where we tend to focus is the intersection of, these are our public dollars. How can we bring access and advancement to underserved populations, whether it's Latina women, whether it's, underserved Black workers, whether it's, youth and young people? How can we bring them into these occupations like outside of the traditional ones, whether it's like care or construction or healthcare?
right.
How can we help them advance?
Mm,
And how can we do so in a way that's on par with their white male counterparts, right? Making sure
right,
that they're
right.
getting the same amount of pay for the same work that they're doing. And
Mm,
so much of this is tied into a little bit of sort of what we're talking about, right? Being mothers and being parents.
yes.
Men certainly don't get a pay cut when they become parents. Women definitely do. Come on, you don't
Yeah.
want money. And I've definitely felt that, right? Like not just in terms of pay, but it's difficult to balance all of that. There is no such thing. And
Yes. Yeah.
so trying to
And it
figure
looks different for everybody.
it's very different for everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's work that's so undervalued, right? And I
Yeah.
know through COVID we've heard a lot more of that. And I
Mm,
definitely, have experienced it firsthand, having to try to balance the two, even with organizations that I see um, as more advanced on the subject, right? It's
mhm.
so challenging for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot to work on
Mhm.
that front.
I am glad. I am thankful. I know COVID was, the pandemic, has been a nightmare for so many people, but I do think a lot of good came out of it, because of like working from home and working remotely, and maybe like a lot of employers seeing like, okay, like, people have families, that's important. Like
Yeah,
things come up, you know, maybe this can look a little bit differently going forward in the future. Maybe we can do things differently.
yeah,
And I'm excited that I see a lot more like remote jobs or hybrid, hybrid jobs, and I think like that's important. I think I think that's the future, right? Like
oh
why
yeah.
weren't we doing that before?
I don't know how anybody survived, frankly, with how different
Yeah, like
everything
what
was.
what in the world? Like, yeah, how
Yeah.
were we not doing that before? Because also like childcare is so expensive,
It is. Oh my gosh. I remember reading that Beyonce like had Blue in daycare and it was like $18,000 a year. I was like, that's a bargain. Like, where is she going?
Yeah, yeah, right. I mean, me and my husband, we do it just us two. We just kind of like coordinate. But my sisters do. They have their little ones in childcare, and I remember my older sister got a promotion, and she like got her master's degree, and she got a promotion, and she was like really happy, and she got a pay raise and all that. And she's like, yeah, but I don't really notice a difference because now our toddler's in daycare. So
Yeah.
that, there goes the pay raise.
Oh yeah, that gets absorbed really quickly for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's I think now we're sort of battling a little bit of, and it's great that we have the option or we're so well set up for doing remote work or hybrid work now. But I think
Right.
a lot of folks now are like having to struggle with, okay, are we bringing people back? Are we bringing them back full time? Are we bringing them back in a hybrid status? Like, what does that look
Yeah.
like? Um,
Mhm.
but I think I remember right before the pandemic, um, I had my son is 5, but this was like a while ago. At the time, he was maybe
Uh,
like 7 months old, and I
oh,
didn't have any childcare during COVID, right? So he was sitting with me while I was in a virtual meeting, and I remember somebody made the comment, "Oh, we're bringing babies to meetings now," and I was just
oh,
like floored. I was just
a little
like,
bit of
"Oh,
shade, huh? Throwing
yeah."
shade, right?
But nobody would ever make that comment now, right? Now the
Right.
discourse has
Right.
completely changed, which is
Right.
wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling to have, and I hope that young mothers everywhere are going to feel that change and are going to be able to come out better for it, both pay wise and frankly like sanity wise with handling
Yes.
everything.
Yeah, I know. Right. Isn't mental health like something that people are openly talking about now? So I think
Yes,
that goes hand in hand with like, um, you know, like how you work and how you balance like work and family life. I think all of that just ties into each other.
yes, it is. I mean, I don't know about I come from a really huge family. Like I said, my grandmother had 11 brothers and sisters, so I always
Yeah.
had tons
Yeah, I
of
think my
cousins
grandpa did.
running
Mhm.
around.
Yeah.
Um,
You have a lot of cousins too, right?
oh yeah, definitely all over the country, right? Some I don't even know, I've never even met, right? Like, but they're there.
Yes,
Um,
that's true. We've just discovered we have we have more cousins than we thought.
yeah, I mean, I come from a really big family, and I want that for my boys too, right? And I
Yeah,
want to be family centered, and so in some ways, you want to balance that being family centered and being there for your kids when you need them, as well as like
right,
being able to contribute in a meaningful way and being valued and
right.
recognized for that.
Yeah, I mean, there should be a way, that
Mhm.
works for people and something realistic, right?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
I mean, we're only human, we're not machines.
We're
So,
not
you
dogs.
know,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, and I think, you have to understand biology. It's like, humans need humans, we need each other.
yeah. Oh,
The kids need their parents, especially, especially moms,
yeah. Oh,
like
yeah.
we're like very much needed. I mean, even like with my husband and I, like, my son will, he's 3.5, but like he has his moments where, he wants to hang out with daddy, but then he'll, like if there are certain things where he's just like, no, I want mommy. I
Oh,
want
yeah.
mommy.
Oh, yeah.
And my husband's like, what's wrong with me? And it's like, no, 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 there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that, sometimes you just need your mommy,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
okay.
absolutely, and you wanna be there for them too, like, you wanna
Yeah,
be that person, and you wanna be able to support them, if they need help with their homework or, like, they're having something going on at school, right? And
yeah,
so, I mean,
definitely.
I think, in some of the jobs that I've had, and this one particularly, like, it's 24/7, right? It's nonstop. You go into
Mhm.
these knowing you're gonna sprint, for 4 years or however long you have, and figuring out how to balance that and how to create boundaries around that
Mhm.
is hard to do. But what I
Yeah,
see that's amazing is there's so many young women working with me right now that have had babies or going on paternity leave or able to make it work. And I'm really heartened by that. I'm really heartened by the ability for them to both make a huge impact and have a 7 month old at home and still be able to
yes.
do the job and not feel like they're being pulled in a million different directions, or maybe they do and they just don't show it
I
as much.
know. But that's important, right? I mean, I have a 3-month-old, so I just started working again. And so, yeah, it's important to have, to know that like your employer supports what you do and supports, cares that, hey, are you doing okay? Do you need, more time or, I think all that is really important.
Yeah.
Is there is there anything that like that maybe we haven't covered yet that you want to like talk about? It could be, in your upbringing. It could be like, actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, um, just kind of going back, I know you kind of you said something about like obstacles, like hardships, and like, can you give an example of like an obstacle that maybe you encountered, even getting to this position, or even just in previous, positions?
Of course. I think I'll give one example and I'll keep sort of the specifics out of it so that
Oh yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah. No, play it
but
safe.
there was an instance where I was trying to balance sort of being a new mom and having two kids at home and being at work and traveling and doing all of that.
Mm,
And I don't know that I was really doing I was having a hard time with both of those. And so the job that I was in was a little bit inflexible. And part of it was like they were struggling to try to figure out like how to handle that too, right? And so
mm,
I really felt like I wasn't performing. And they
mm.
felt I wasn't performing also.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so I remember that situation where there was an opportunity where somebody would be promoted and somebody would be demoted. And I was
Oh,
actually demoted. Um,
oh wow.
and I remember that period, being a huge obstacle and just like always second guessing myself, like, oh my gosh, how are people able to do this? What's going to happen? Um,
Yeah,
and I think, you go back to your Latinidad and sort of like how you operate and how you tend to like, what is the core of who you are, right? And where does that
right,
come
right.
from? And so I think back to, all the obstacles my mom faced, for instance, coming into this country with
Mm,
like all these educational and language barriers and not knowing a soul except for my dad. And, I
yeah.
think about my grandmother and like everything she went through. And so my husband
Mhm,
likes to call this my armadillo phase.
mhm.
So the armadillo phase is just basically you put up your shell,
Yeah,
you just kind of hunker down and you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Right.
yeah,
And
just
so
like,
yeah, exactly. Just like armadillo, like, and move forward, just roll forward.
yeah, just like do it.
And so that's what I did, right? It was
Mhm,
really hard when I was going through it. There was a lot of
mhm.
self-doubt. I was just like, oh my gosh, how is this going to look on my resume? How is this going to look down the line? I
Right.
really just need to pull myself out of the workforce and focus on being a parent right now. And I talked to a lot of people. I took a step back and I was like, you know what? I think I just need to get out of this environment right now.
Yeah.
It's probably that this is just not a good fit. And it's less
Mhm.
that I'm not worthy or, they're out to get me or anything like that. It's more that
Right.
like this has run its course and I need to find something else.
Yeah.
Um, and looking back on it, that's probably one of the toughest professional encounters that I've had, but it's
Mm.
also one that I learned from quite a bit. Like you have to be able to like, come away from these kinds of situations with a nugget of self-awareness of like, this is what I could have done differently and this is what I could have done better. However,
Yeah.
that does not mean that I don't have a certain amount of value and that I can't contribute in a certain way. And
Right.
so, you emerge from those kinds of situations, I think, a lot stronger and a lot more capable.
That's great. That's like a really good lesson. It's a hard lesson too. It's also like, like teaches you like when to walk away, right?
Yeah.
Like
I mean, and so
I
much of
think
your self-worth is like put into your job too. That's the other thing that you start to
right.
realize.
Yeah, that's true. I think also as like as women and Latinas, like we pride ourselves on being like hard workers, right?
Oh yeah.
And so to like walk away from a job, we're almost like we kind of almost like kill ourselves, to the point where we're just like, okay, how much more can I take? And it's like,
Yeah.
because we are tough, we are like, we are tough as women and as Latinas, but yeah, it does take a lot of, I think like maturity, self-awareness to be like, hey, I think like you said, it's run its course,
Yeah.
so that's a really great lesson actually.
It was hard.
um
Hard in the moment.
yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah, I mean, I've had my experiences too, and yeah, that's that's definitely not easy. So it teaches you something. It gives you thicker skin, then you look back and you're like, okay, I did that, I'm
Yeah.
proud of myself. I did that.
Yeah, and I emerged
No,
from that and I'm doing this now, right? And so I think, yeah, you can start to see sort of where, and you just being honest with yourself, like, okay, well, maybe that wasn't a strength of mine. Maybe, presenting on
yeah.
PowerPoint is not like where I wanted to
Yeah.
focus,
And
right? I
that's okay, right? I think,
something else.
and
Yeah,
that's great, right? Knowing like your strengths and your weaknesses, right? It's like, okay, I may not be good at this thing, and that's okay. Like, but I'm really good at this other thing.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure you take that into like your current role, as chief of staff. It's like you're you have so many people under you, and just I'm sure you're taking those lessons, into that, and how you like interact with people in your department as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've had many situations where, I mean, not just here, but elsewhere, where I've had colleagues come to me and say, like, I hear it in their voice. It's like really painful for them. Like, I want to be able to do my job, but I can't because of X, Y, and Z. Either it's
Mm,
because they just had a kid, or because they are encountering some health issues, or because they have a disability that they, are working with, right? Or they're trying to find
mm,
some sort of support around, or
yeah,
even just, people just speak a different language from me, right? And that's something that I experienced too. It's like I would say something, and then I almost felt like we were just kind of like not communicating. We were just sort of passing each other,
yeah,
and that's just such a common situation. And
right,
that's frankly at the heart of why you want equity in your workplace, and why you want it to be central to what your workplace stands for, right? Is because
right,
you know that everybody is different, and they're coming with different things.
right. Yeah, and you want it to work for everyone, right?
Hmm.
Like you want everyone to win. I mean, at the end of the day, So how can we help everyone, right?
Exactly.
Um,
How
that's
can
great.
we try to accommodate for everyone and still
Right.
create an atmosphere where they can be their own selves, and they can bring their whole selves to work, but they can be successful, right? At the end of the day, we
Mhm.
want everyone to be successful.
Right. Yeah, that's important. That's great. Again, is there anything else, I guess, that we haven't touched on that you feel like it's important to say, that you want to like, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has their own journey to go on, and I think the one thing that I just want to double down on, and I didn't,
mhm.
this took a turn into like motherhood in the workforce, and it was
Yeah.
sort of inevitable, but it was great.
Yeah.
I wasn't anticipating that. But I will say, I'm going to double down on that, the same way that you grow personally, right? To give yourself a little bit of a stretch, to always go towards things that feel like you're punching above your weight. That's how you tend to grow. And to
Mhm.
not be afraid of failure, because you will come back from it no matter what happens. I think those are the things that both personally and professionally will help you grow and will get you to places that you never anticipated. I've had experiences, I've been in rooms with people where I think, oh my goodness, this is an amazing person, right? This is the vice president, or this is,
Yeah.
the first lady, or whomever. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm so lucky that I'm here. But then I think
Yeah.
about everything that got me to that point, right? And how, you know, if I had been afraid of doing certain things, or if I had like not taken that job because I thought I wasn't equipped for it,
Mm.
I never would have gotten those opportunities. So really always stretch yourself in those kinds of scenarios, even if you're afraid that you can't do the job, or afraid that you have, or if you have imposter syndrome, which I think everybody does have some version of that at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And
Um,
then now there's a name for it, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just know, you have to think back to yourself, like, this is my value, this is what I bring to the table, and this is why I'm here.
That's great. That's great advice. Thank you. Yeah, this has been great. I think that for all the Latinas listening, this is one of those conversations that will hopefully help many of them out there. Like if they're in a bad position at work, or if they're, struggling with balance, or like, what do I do in my life? Like what can I focus on? I think, you've definitely like, said a lot of things, that just, speak to that. So,
Thank you.
so thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest, on the Latina Leadership Podcast. And, I want to make sure that I don't leave anything out. Because, sometimes you hit end, and then you go back and you're like, oh darn it, there was that one thing I wanted to say.
Same
Let's
way on
see.
both sides, actually.
Um, have you met the president, by the way?
I have not had an opportunity to meet the president. No, actually, it's a funny story. This was actually during the Obama administration. We went to the West Wing for a meeting, and we had no idea where we were going. We thought nobody told us what room we were in, so we just kind of walked into the Situation Room.
Oh my goodness.
And then in comes at the time Vice President Biden and his entourage, and
Oh,
someone looked at us and were like, "You're not in the right place."
like,
We're like, I think
like we
are. I
we
think
should
we
now.
are.
That is hilarious. Oh wow. So you've met, or you saw, Vice President Biden at the time.
Yes, yes. And then there was an event
Hmm.
at the White House for Halloween with
Uh-huh.
President Obama. And so my oldest son, who's now 7 at the time, he was 2,
Uh-huh.
was able
Oh,
to go up to him with his little Yoda costume on to get candy. We get up to
oh,
the line. He's like, been fidgeting the whole time, and he just throws his
mhm.
Yoda hat at the president. And I was just mortified. I was mortified. And I have a video of
Oh my gosh.
being as gracious as he possibly could be, saying, "I'll get it,
Yeah.
I'll get it." Handed it back to
Oh,
me. That Yoda hat is now enshrined. I can promise
oh
you.
my gosh. I'm glad you got, and you said you got on video.
Yes, I looked at my husband immediately. I was like, "Did you get that?"
And President Obama, he always seems like he's just such a family guy. Like he's just like cool.
Yes, I know. If we could all be so cool. I
Oh my
agree.
gosh, I know. He's like the epitome of cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, for being a guest again. This has been awesome. This has been great. Um, Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing, what you do, and why it's important, and why equity is important. Um, and why focusing on youth, is important. I think, I look forward to seeing, I guess how we, advance, forward as a country. I guess in the workforce, I look forward to seeing like all the positive, changes. I think, with this generation and with future generations, I think, there's been more positive change, with every generation. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of that.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully talking again in the future. And I'm excited about things to come as well. Bye. Thanks so much. Have a good
Bye.
What did you think of the conversation? If you enjoyed what you heard, let us know in the comments. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you for listening to the Latina Leadership Podcast, and we will see you next time.